Welcome to Reproaction's November webinar, Who is Students for Life of America? I'm going to go ahead and jump into it. So first, I will introduce myself and then pass it to my co-host. My name is Jessica Ensley. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Senior Vice President of Outreach at Reproaction, and I'm based in Washington, D.C. And I'll pass it over to Kieran.
Thank you, Jessica. Hey, everyone. My name is Kieran Mailman. My pronouns are they and he. I am the Senior Strategic Research Director at Reproaction, and I am based in Northern Virginia.
Here's an overview of our agenda for today. I'm going to introduce the organization. We will jump into the topic overview before we head to our panel discussion. And then we will discuss some housekeeping items before we get to a Q&A. If you have questions as we are going through this webinar for our panelists at the end, please feel free to enter them in the questions section. And then you can join our conversation by live posting hashtag Reproaction or following us at Reproaction on Blue Sky. So, to introduce a little bit about our organization, Reproaction leads bold action to increase access to abortion and advance reproductive justice. We're known for our left flank analysis, our willingness to hold folks on all sides accountable, whether they be allies or opposition, and we are committed to nonviolent direct action. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kieran to go over today's topic.
Awesome. Thank you, Jessica. So to get us started, I just want to give us all a common understanding of who Students for Life of America is. Students for Life of America is an anti-abortion organization whose stated goal is to save babies, empower women, and abolish abortion, and that emphasis is theirs. They aim to do this by mobilizing young people, primarily millennials and Gen Z, increasingly just Gen Z. They were originally founded in the late 1970s as campus. In 1988, they became the American Collegians for Life. And finally, in 2006, Students for Life, as we know it, came to be with Kristen Hawkins at the helm. When Hawkins took over SFLA, they allegedly had under 200 different campus chapters. Today, Students for Life of America claims to have 1,607 different campus groups, including broader college groups, medical and law student specific groups, and even high school groups. Next slide, please. Thank you. So more on Students for Life. Since their 2006 rebrand, they've launched 4 different initiatives. They have the Mary Demetri Institute for Pro-Life Advancement, which is their own in-house messaging and research arm. Students for Life Action, their 501c4 political arm that they use to introduce model legislation and influence key elections. They claim to be active with Students for Life Action in all 50 states. They have the Campaign for Abortion-Free Cities, which partners with churches and other anti-abortion organizations to distribute anti-abortion literature in communities throughout the US. And they have Standing With You, formerly Pregnant on Campus, which claims to provide resources to pregnant and parenting students. SFLA's finances are key to helping us understand their reach. According to their 2024 990, SFLA brought in $17,602,707 and paid their president, Kristen Hawkins, $254,691. The end result of this is a well-funded anti-abortion organization that can craft misleading and deceptive messaging in-house, effectively spread it to young people across the US, and then use that propaganda to inform legislation and electoral politics. Next, thank you. So what do they say? What are their claims about their alleged beliefs? So they claim that abortion pills are dangerous and are polluting the water. They claim that abortion is a eugenic practice, and they specifically claim that it is targeting Black women. They claim that most forms of birth control are abortifacient. They claim IVF is dangerous and has ethical problems. And while they represent themselves as opposed to the criminalization of people who have abortions, Kristen Hawkins said in a February 2025 podcast that she is in a camp of anti-abortion advocates who say prosecute abortionists now and perhaps women later after culture and laws are changed. So she is not ruling out the criminalization of people who have abortions. So what are they up to? What are they doing? Well, first of all, they're spreading disinformation, especially about abortion pills and so-called abortion pollution. They are consistently circulating petitions, sending letters, writing articles, and otherwise making bogus claims about the alleged harms of abortion pills. They are also taking this disinformation on the road with speaking tours, such as their Abortion is Oppression tour, which you can see here on the right, and the Make Gen Z Anti-Abortion tour. And these are their two fall 2025 tours. They are using their bogus claims to inform policy through things like their Make America Pro-Life Again roadmap, which includes a lot of legislation targeting abortion pills. So we have the Ending Chemical Abortion Act, which would ban medication abortions and criminalize people who provide abortion pills. We have the Tele-Abortion Prevention Act, which would ban the prescription of abortion pills via telemedicine and require multiple in-person visits, which is a barrier to care for many. We have the Clean Water for All Act, which would codify SFLA's bogus claims about so-called abortion pollution and require people having medication abortions to collect the products of their abortion in a special bag meant for medical waste. And the Stopping Traffickers and Their Accomplices Act, which echoes anti-abortion claims that abortion providers allegedly fail to report human trafficking violations and would increase reporting requirements for abortion providers. They are also engaging in political races, including but not limited to their own vice president, Tina Whittington's school board race, as you can see here on the right. And Tina Whittington did end up winning her school board race in Virginia. This one needed its own slide because it is egregious. They are co-opting racial justice messages for their anti-abortion cause, and in some cases suing. In 2020, at the height of the Black Lives Matter protests taking place in response to the murder of George Floyd, Students for Life started their Black Preborn Lives Matter campaign. You can see a billboard from that campaign here on the right. On the left, you see a person being arrested with the caption "lawsuit filed." After being told they couldn't write Black Preborn Lives Matter in front of a DC Planned Parenthood in 2020, SFLA members attempted to do it anyway and were briefly arrested. They and another anti-abortion organization sued, and as of March 2025, are still in court. So today is Trans Day of Remembrance, so it felt appropriate to mention the ways that SFLA and other anti-abortion organizations promote anti-trans rhetoric, both online and on campuses, as anti-abortion organizations are frequently key promoters of anti-trans rhetoric. I've included 4 screenshots on this slide, 2 from the Students for Life Action blog and 2 from Kristen Hawkins' Twitter account. In these screenshots, SFLA and Hawkins clearly link the anti-abortion and anti-trans movements while repeating disinformation about trans people. This includes claims that abortion and gender-affirming care cause infertility, claims that trans people and access to gender-affirming care are a threat to children, and claims that supporting abortion and trans people somehow harms cisgender women. So everything I've said so far is very concerning, but I think it's important to lift up that Students for Life and their bogus claims are not going on unchallenged. Students across the country are pushing back against Students for Life and their campaign of disinformation. This includes groups like Medical Students for Choice, whose Midwestern University of Arizona chapter actively pushed back against Medical Students for Life's misinformation. We're also seeing campus protests against SFLA, including an October 2025 protest held by students at the University of Arizona, who directly named the misinformation about abortion pills and so-called abortion pollution being pushed by Students for Life. We've also documented at least one instance in which an SFLA counter-protest allegedly led to intimidation and aggression by Students for Life members and their personal security team. So while they weren't able to be here with us today, Cardinals for Choice at Catholic University was generous enough to share some of their experiences with us. They noted that while not all of the pushback they receive on campus was from Students for Life, Students for Life is definitely supporting many anti-abortion students on their campus. They described at least one anti-abortion individual complaining to the dean of students' office about pro-choice students, trying to get them in trouble for their political views, and also complaining about students who work for the school because of their pro-choice views. They had a specific incident involving a nursing teacher who invited a doula to speak about her work helping with childbirth and post-birth care for mothers. During the class, an anti-abortion student started recording the lecture and asked questions about the doula's views on abortion and trans people giving birth. The doula felt uncomfortable but was pressured into answering. She discussed her role as an abortion doula and the concept of seahorse births, which, for context, is what a term to refer to trans men and trans masculine people who get pregnant and give birth. Afterward, the pro life student leaked the recording to the Catholic newspaper, sparking controversy. As a result, the administration decided to fire the teacher who had invited the doula and ban the doula from speaking or even being on campus. The doula proceeded to receive death threats via phone and email from so-called pro-lifers. Allegedly, the controversy led to costly lawsuits against the school. The anti-abortion student who recorded admitted to their actions in an article in the school's newspaper, boasting about their recording and the teacher's subsequent firing. This was a direct attack on free speech for both students and staff, and the administration's response revealed their stance on pro-choice opinions in the classroom. This incident made students feel uneasy about discussing reproductive rights openly. However, Cardinals for Choice does uplift a positive outcome of this, which is strong pro-choice outrage among both students and alumni. Cardinals for Choice issued a statement condemning the school's actions, which received 420 likes and many responses from alumni who said that they withdrew their funding from the institution because of this incident. So it is even at Catholic universities, Students for Life and other anti-abortion organizations spreading misinformation are getting pushback, which I think is incredible. And I will pass it to Jessica to introduce our first panelist.
Thank you so much, Karen, for that overview. Let me go to the next slide. I am thrilled to introduce our first panelist, Lucia Everest. She, her pronouns, is a junior at George Washington University. She has been on the leadership board of GW Rage since her freshman year and has been working in reproductive advocacy for the last 6 years. She's eager to share her experiences so collectively we can best organize against anti-choice organizations. Lucia, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
My first question for you, um, having spent 6 years in reproductive advocacy, what have the interactions between Students for Life of America and other anti-abortion organizations been like with campus students and organizers? How does that look like on GW's campus?
Yeah, so I just realized in my description I didn't fully explain what RAGE was or what RAGE is. So RAGE is reproductive autonomy and gender equity. We have a bunch of different programs for students on campus, including an abortion support collective, contraceptive access, sexual education, and resource materials. So we're kind of an all-encompassing organization in that. And George Washington is a little bit of an enigma in that kind of everyone who goes here has an opinion and is sticking really strong to it. So in the past, when I was in high school, I went to high school in Minnesota, and I would say majority of the anti-choice people I talked to, unless like in a lobbying scenario or something like that, they didn't really approach me. They weren't instigating things, but that completely changed when I came to GW. Our Students for Life organization is very active, and it's an interesting dynamic because Students for Life, the members of Students for Life, like if you look at their Instagram, you look at that sort of stuff, it doesn't look like they have many active members. They get most of their support through their like partnership organizations. So they function through the Turning Point chapter here. They function through the GW Catholics chapter here and the College Republicans. So they're kind of, they've infiltrated different things with that. But last year, or last spring on Kristen Hawkins' Make Abortion Illegal Again tour, I guess, she did come to our campus, and there were some very interesting dynamics that were posed by the people supporting Students for Life. Like we encouraged people to not go to the event, that giving a platform is giving them power that they don't deserve. Um, and which ended up working, and only around 5 people showed up to the event, but then it kind of sparked some frustration between the students who organized the event and Kristen Hawkins. So they actually were going up to people on the streets. I was approached by them with a camera, asking questions about um, my opinions and things like that. So it's very, I would say, the interactions that we have with Students for Life are very direct, and they kind of are reinvigorated by, they're funded by a lot of different adult organizations. They have a lot of different non-campus organizations that do work with them. And yeah,
Thank you. And Lucia, did you respond when Hawkins approached you that day?
I did not. I just walked away and I kept walking and I said, is my right to not respond, and I is my right to request you do not follow me. I did not, because I think a common misconception, and our university has this as well, that like sometimes Students for Life reaches out to us and they like want to have a discussion with us. They say they want to have a respectful dialogue. When in reality, this isn't a discussion of two different perspectives. It's a discussion of facts and false statements. So I think they try and pose it as, oh, Rage doesn't want to talk to us because they don't have the capacity to have a legitimate conversation. They kind of like they try and make it like an immaturity thing, when in reality it is just trying to ensure that what we say isn't taken out of context, because they do take photos of us and they do take videos of what we are saying, and they can really do what they want with that information. Um, so we are very careful about interacting with people in these organizations.
Absolutely. That's really smart. And thank you for sharing your experience on that. They do take videos out of context and will edit it however they want for their platforms to be watched by millions of viewers. So that is a very good tactic to not engage if people are approached by any sort of quote unquote anti-abortion news or filming organizations. You always want to ask for their credentials if you're not sure. My next question for you is, we're talking about them specifically targeting students across the country. When a national anti-abortion organization is planning to come to GW's campus, you mentioned at least with the Hawkins, I believe you said spring tour, you had recommended folks don't come, which was successful. Are there other ways in which you prepare your community or approach these dialogues with fellow organizers on campus?
Yeah, so our first thing is transparency, reaching out to different orgs and making like we start posting on social media about it right when it is announced that they are coming to campus. It's super important that people not only have the information about the organization, but have time to process it. It's critical that like our student body is able to process the information and like extend it out to everyone, because a lot of people who don't know a lot about this topic, it's really very easy to be manipulated by these national organizations. They have a lot of money, they have a lot of resources, and if someone's coming at you with a camera and you haven't been trained in how to react to that, it can be really hard to not respond. So we do a lot of how-tos on if you're approached by someone, if someone has taken a photo of you, things like that. And then more institutionally, we do a student organizer training series. So we actually have every semester we have different people apply and become like student organizer leaders on our campus, and through that training we do talk about a lot of de-escalation. So the idea is then when we are getting information about people coming to our campus, that they go out and use the information that they have learned in our programs to tell others as well.
I love that. That just showcases such great work that GW Rage is doing. We have a lot of respect at Reproaction for GW Rage. We've done a lot of events together, and have had many employees that have once been a part of GW Rage. So that's really cool to hear about some of those initiatives that you all work with, and that seems very effective. My last question for you is what types of anti-abortion myths or disinformation are you finding most common on your campus, and how do you combat that?
I would say the most prevalent rhetoric is that self-managed abortions and abortion pills are unsafe and unregulated. That I hear from people who are antis, but I also hear that from people who um, like tend to like sit more in the middle. We just really try and educate people on self-medicated abortion, especially in like the current climate and things like that. We have a doula collective, so we actually are able to connect students with another student who's been trained as a doula to kind of walk them through their self-medicated abortion if they want. So we are just trying to open up as many avenues as we can to continue this conversation. I think a lot of people don't want to even entertain this conversation, especially antis, because the truth is like the facts say that it is safe. So that can be kind of hard because if you are coming at it with you only have facts, and people are just coming at you with emotions, it can be difficult because if they're not listening to the facts, it's really hard to reason with that. So again, just like knowing the groups that you need to be talking to, knowing where to put your energy, but just overall education and unapologetically talking about it. I think that is the biggest thing. We need a shift in our even here and like in places with like very prevalent like reproductive action groups. We just need a shift in societal norms. And it needs to be talked about more. And so we do whatever we can to sneak in conversations about medication abortion and just to remove the stigma because abortions are normal. And I think a lot of people have been told otherwise. So
Absolutely. And the advocacy work that you and GW Rage and other campus organizing that we'll get into on this panel is incredibly important for that. Lucia needs to head out. So I just want to take the time here to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you and hearing your expertise on the matter.
thank you.
Wonderful. So we are going to head into our next panelist, but if you have questions for our next couple panelists, please feel free to enter them into the chat. And with that, I will pass it over to Kieran to get us started on our next panelist.
Thank you, Jessica, and thank you again to Lucia. Our next panelist is Hannah Breslaw, she, her. Hannah is a Master of Public Policy candidate at the University of Maryland, College Park, specializing in social policy. Last May, she graduated from the University of Maryland, College Park with a Bachelor of Arts in Public Policy with a concentration in racial and gender justice and a minor in nonprofit leadership and social innovation. As an undergraduate student, Hannah serves as the field director and president of Students for Reproductive Justice. She also founded College Park Plan B, a free emergency contraception and safe sex supplies peer distribution network. Currently, Hannah is an intern for the Maryland Commission for Women, where she does policy and program work. Hannah is a passionate reproductive justice advocate, participating in the Advocates for Youth Abortion Support Collective, volunteering as a clinic escort with the Washington Area Clinic Defense Task Force, and training with the newest DC Doulas for Choice cohort. Hannah, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Awesome. So my first question for you is just generally, if you can tell us a little bit about how Students for Life and other anti-abortion groups have impacted your campus organizing.
Of course, yeah. And I really appreciate everything that Lucia said about her experience at GW and also that y'all uplifted the experiences of some of my peers at Catholic University because I know they deal with this maybe a little bit more than I do at UMD. But all of that to say, I feel pretty lucky that Students for Life honestly does not have a huge presence on my campus. And like into if we're talking about campus organizing and being organized, I would consider them to be a pretty unorganized student group. I guess they try to reach students by using super vague language like, are you interested in helping pregnant or parenting women and children? But in reality, they aren't actually doing anything to carry out that goal, which is evident by, like I said, the lack of presence that they have on campus. Also echoing what Lucia said, there is a huge amount of overlap between Students for Life on campus and other groups such as College Republicans and the Turning Point USA chapter here at UMD, both between general members, board members. And, I think that goes back to the point of what you were saying at the beginning, Kieran, of like, what do these groups really stand for and the overlap there kind of brings up some other points about that. But they have approached us before in a way where they kind of, as Lucia was saying, like they want to pin us as the immature ones, the ones who don't want to engage, and that they are trying to have this constructive dialogue. So they've approached us before and asked, do you want to collaborate on this project to support pregnant and parenting students? And that's always a pretty easy no for us because we obviously have very different ideas of what it means to support pregnant and parenting students and just support people in general and create a safe and inclusive environment for people on campus. And then the last thing I would add that I think is kind of interesting about their presence is that they have a like grown adult woman who I think is just like an organizer with Students for Life who they send to campus, and she will sometimes table outside of our student union. And I honestly don't think that the general student body is very receptive to that just because pe they're much more willing to engage like student to student interaction rather than this adult woman who's like standing outside and asking everyone who walks by, like, does life begin at conception? Like these crazy things. Um, but we do generally think about certain things in our group, like digital security, making sure our communication channels are secure, being mindful with things like our safe sex supplies distribution, and, like there's a chance people with ill intentions might request materials to deplete our supply, rather than actually use them. But then, at the same time, anti-abortion activists also need emergency contraception, maybe, and condoms. And so there's certain measures we take, but generally not a huge interference.
I'm so glad to hear that they are largely not interfering with your work. I do think it's interesting what you said about an adult member of Students for Life tabling outside of campus. I think that's something that a point that's been made about Kristen Hawkins being the face of Students for Life when she is in her 40s. It's interesting to me that the majority of the representation we see from them regularly is not people in the demographic they claim to be organizing. I am curious because you had mentioned them using really vague like requests about helping pregnant people to try and lure people in. Do you know if that tactic has seen any success for them on campus?
Honestly, I don't think so. And again, like I'm familiar with some of like the faces of these people, but mostly where I see them popping up is with, the College Republicans and even the Turning Point USA chapter on campus. And so while they are organizing for, these right-wing causes, most of it, in my experience, does not have to do with like anti-abortion rhetoric.
Okay, that's okay. So this is going to lead actually, I think, nicely into my next question because they are using this fake language. And we've talked a lot about anti-abortion myths and disinformation already on this webinar. Um, are you hearing a lot of this kind of anti-abortion disinformation? What are the most common claims that you're hearing? And how do you and other organizers on campus push back against that?
Yeah, so I honestly would say that like almost everything they do and say, actually, I would say that everything is based on misinformation, and that can be part of why it can feel so just like frustrating and almost like at times a little bit ridiculous that like these are the people in opposition to us. But yeah, I really appreciate these questions because we hear a lot of the same things again and again. I think the biggest thing is like that abortion is murder and that we as a like collective of students are celebrating people who are killing their babies. That's a pretty easy one for us to counter. You know, we support people's rights to all options, and we know that pregnancies end in all different ways. And the most important thing to us is that people are informed to make the best decisions for themselves in a dignified and empowering way. And that does not include like harassing people who are accessing care or unsure about how they want to move forward, which is, as we know, a tactic that they generally use in the anti-abortion movement frequently. We have had groups, just like general anti-abortion groups, come to campus. Nobody really knows who they are. They're like a traveling caravan, I would say, and they'll stand in public spaces with those giant posters that are supposed to represent like a dismembered fetus. We know that these are like medically inaccurate photos and they're supposed to have this like shock factor and be used to fear-monger people. And again, echoing my peers at Rage, like the biggest thing we can do is educate our campus and provide like accurate information to counter that. And then I would say, lastly, the biggest thing is mis and disinformation surrounding medication abortion. Clearly, they are really, really angry that so many people are self-managing their abortions and that that's kind of undermining their attempts to ban abortion access, like in every capacity. Um, and a big part of this, as Lucia said, is that it's unsafe. People should be accessing abortion like in a medical setting. And we really try to emphasize, or we don't want to put like a hierarchy on the ways that people have abortions. We know that there are many different ways that people um, access abortion care and have their abortions. And you know, that looks different for everyone. And yeah, this new thing that I have recently discovered is that they're trying to tell everyone that there is chemical abortion pills in our drinking water, which has been completely refuted by environmental scientists and kind of just shows, I believe, the ridiculous measures that they are going to push their agenda. But yeah, overall, we just provide educational resources, uplift the knowledge of people like abortion providers, doulas and midwives, destigmatizing abortion through storytelling, especially student experiences with their abortions. And I would also shout out the Reproaction SMA info session that we like to have, because that's really helpful in just like demystifying medication abortion.
Hannah, I'm so glad to hear that the SMA info sessions have been helpful to y'all. And I also just really appreciate what you said about not putting different methods of abortion access into a hierarchy, because as groups like Students for Life continue to push their rhetoric, it's going to become more important for us to emphasize the full range of options that people have for abortion. My final question for you is, what advice would you give pro-choice students and campus organizers who are faced with groups like Students for Life? And I want to quickly note we have about a minute before we need to move to the next panelist.
All right, I will make this quick. I would say don't engage. They want to twist everything that you say, and provoke you and get a reaction out of you. And what I would just leave y'all with is I would encourage everyone to center reproductive justice in your organizing because we know that they never will. They don't care about the actual well-being of people. And they want to pin us as some sort of group, like all these outlandish things that we don't want to feed into. But because of what reproductive justice centers, I think it is really so crucial, to uplift those values in our work. because at the end of the day, like when they're the people standing outside of clinics and harassing people and spreading misinformation, we are standing for all of these things based on our shared human dignity and the care that we have for one another. And it just makes it really clear that like we are working for meaningful change while they are spreading misinformation, lies, and trying to spread fear.
Yes, I love when in doubt, not engaging is always going to be the best policy. Hannah, thank you so much again for being here with us today. If you have questions for Hannah or our other panelists, please go ahead and put those in the chat. In the meantime, I will pass it back to Jessica to introduce our third panelist.
Thank you very much, Kieran and Hannah. And Hannah, I just wanted to note, I believe likely the organization that you had seen on campus was Created Equal or another similar organization. They use that imagery that you invoked is very much Created Equal. They came to my campus when I was a student, and now they have GoPros like attached to their body. So very much do not engage. They are hoping people will mess with them so they can just launch a ton of lawsuits. So, um, but back to today's topic at hand, Students for Life of America. I am thrilled to introduce Dr. Rachel Reed. One second, let me just move one of my things out of the way so I can read. So Dr. Rachel Reed uses she, they pronouns, is a family medicine resident passionate about reproductive justice, LGBTQ plus healthcare, and abortion care. They have a background in public health, including infectious disease monitoring, program planning and evaluation, qualitative research, and social determinants of health, and organizational leadership. She is passionate about the integration of abortion care and gender affirming care into the primary care setting and aspires to provide full scope primary care as a family medicine physician. They previously served on the board of directors for Desert Star Institute for Family Planning, which is a reproductive justice nonprofit in Arizona. She has also served in various reproductive health related leadership positions within the American Medical Student Association and Medical Students for Choice. Rachel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
My first question for you is what got you interested in focusing on health justice as a whole?
Yeah, so before I was a medical student and a physician, my background is in public health. And so I did both my bachelor's and master's in public health. And so, kind of from the very beginning of my formal education, how I looked at health was from kind of a health justice perspective. And so, kind of coming from that background, working in a health department during COVID and seeing how health justice really played out during the pandemic. And then ultimately, what really changed my perspective was my work with Desert Star Institute for Family Planning, which is a nonprofit but also health justice clinic in Arizona that does provide abortion care. And I have spent a lot of time volunteering there and learning from Dr. Deshawn Taylor and just kind of centering all of the learning I've done and also just my approach to reproductive health care now as a provider, kind of centering around that reproductive justice framework.
Great. Thank you for walking us through that. And that's very much making me think of, I'm so glad you had that experience at Desert Star Institute. And it's just making me think of, unfortunately, all the folks who are interested in medicine or who medical doctors and really have to struggle to get access to learn abortion care. So I might ask you about that later if we have time during our Q&A.
Sure.
But my next question for you right now is when you were on campus, uh, how did Students for Life and other anti-abortion groups, did they impact your campus organizing or the work and research that you were doing to further your education?
Absolutely. So my second year of medical school, some rumors kind of popped up that some of the students in my year were wanting to start a new Students for Life America chapter, Medical Students for Life, on our campus. And this, for the reasons that have been talked about already in this webinar, was really concerning to me and a lot of other students. And so we had kind of initially sent a kind of letter to our dean, because not everyone is familiar with truly how extreme, problematic, and how much disinformation this organization spreads. So we had sent a letter to the dean just kind of outlining a lot of the things that were talked about earlier today, specifically that are just complete disinformation and medically unsafe. And our student government actually voted against their approval as a club. Interestingly, our deans and student services overrode that decision, kind of saying, that kind of free speech argument, and said they'd be kind of tightly regulated to make sure they were not spreading this disinformation, even though it's just completely intertwined in SFLA as an org. And I think kind of in the fallout of this, one, I think it decreased the credibility of my medical school. It really fractured a lot of my relationship with some of the faculty, deans, and leadership that kind of endorsed this group. It was really alienating. Um, but also then there was this flip to our Medical Students for Choice chapter was being kind of um, there was more attention to what we were doing. We had multiple events canceled because we had, quote, controversial speakers. Meanwhile, Medical Students for Life were having equally public and controversial speakers coming to their groups. And so I think I noticed a huge uptake in just kind of feeling more aware of how many truly anti-abortion and anti-science people there were, not only in our student body, but also in my medical school admin and some of our faculty. And I think that was really disappointing to me, and pretty demoralizing as well. Um, yeah, I think just kind of there was this tangible shift on campus of it just feeling like there were more anti-abortion extremists that were being emboldened. I actually got doxxed kind of in the midst of all of this, which was very scary. And I think overall, like our medical school decided to protect Medical Students for Life and this idea of free speech. And in the meantime, there's a lot of harm done to the majority of the student body who were, pro-choice and believe that patients should be able to have access to all reproductive options. So I think this whole situation was really interesting and kind of shed light on how prevalent some of these ideas are also in the medical field and on medical school campuses.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing your experience. And I'm so sorry that the doxing situation happened to you. That's an incredibly scary and isolating feeling, on top of navigating folks you view as mentors, sort of going down this anti-science route, especially in a time now when we have the head of Health and Human Services pushing against vaccines and Tylenol for pregnancy use. Yeah, it now especially we need people like you who have an all-encompassing view of healthcare and are passionate about caring for marginalized communities. So keep doing what you're doing. My final question for you is, and you touched on this a little bit, now as a healthcare provider, why is it so important that we do push back against this mis and disinformation that we're seeing?
Yeah, I think healthcare providers, and especially medical students and residents who are kind of lower on the training hierarchy, have been hesitant to speak out on issues that have been considered to be, quote, political. And I think there has been a shift to like this idea that healthcare is political. And just by advocating for evidence-based medicine, for patient autonomy, for what's best for our patients, that's not like taking inappropriate political stances. I think there's a lot of regulations from the institutions that we work for and learn under that kind of make us feel like we're unable to speak out. That being said, I think it's really, really important because as healthcare providers, like we are kind of upheld to these like core ethics. And I've kind of mentioned this already, but specifically evidence-based medicine, things that are backed by research that are supported for patient safety and patient outcomes, supporting patient autonomy, informed consent, and ultimately not projecting our values on patients. Like that is completely inappropriate. Our job is to give patients all the information they need to make informed decisions on their healthcare, and this absolutely applies to reproductive health and abortion care. And so I think healthcare is political. It's important that as healthcare providers, both in the exam room one-on-one and also on bigger levels in the legislature, in the media, that we are clarifying that this is completely unacceptable disinformation, that this is dangerous for patients, that it's unethical, and that specifically these beliefs and actions that Students for Life America are taking especially do not belong on educational campuses, on healthcare professions campuses in particular, or in medical institutions, that there's no place for Students for Life America in these settings.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Rachel, for sharing those answers to our questions. And also, yeah, huge shout out if folks are interested. Medical Students for Choice is a really great resource, and can always use additional donations. If you have questions for Dr. Reed or for Hannah, please enter them in the chat. We are going to head over to some housekeeping items. So you can stay tuned for future webinars like this or other content that we're coming out with by looking at our website, reproaction.org. And you can follow us on social media. We are at Reproaction everywhere. And then stay tuned. This is going to be our last webinar of the year. So we will start again in January. And with that, we'll head to our Q&A. So the first question that I have, um, is are there any insights from folks who have been part of Students for Life and left because they ultimately disagreed with them? I will take this first. I will note I haven't seen anything of leadership. They boast a huge uh, audience or support group of college and high school students, many of which we can assume have left. But just haven't spoken out about it. I will also note that the March for Life every year, a majority of their numbers that they tout are high school students that are getting free trips to DC, and that's why they're attending. But I want to pass it to Kieran if you have any additional insight on this.
Hey, I actually do not have anything else to add to that. I have not seen any Students for Life members or former members coming out to talk about their experience, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you. And from what we've seen of Students for Life leadership, many of them, if they will either stay or leave to go to other organizations that are anti-abortion, like the Heritage Foundation and such. So I'm sure they're out there. It wouldn't surprise me either if folks are afraid of maybe speaking out or being super public about it because Students for Life has a larger platform and would likely not take kindly to that as you know, personal safety is very important. Next question is, someone has been tracking the quote unquote water like contamination shtick that Students for Life has been pushing in Montana. Um, Rachel or Hannah, have either of you seen them handing out apparently filtration water bottles on campuses?
I have not, but I mean, that really does not surprise me.
I haven't either. Surprisingly, that was a one point, and maybe because it's a little bit of a newer tactic, that was not something that was kind of one of their key things that they were kind of talking about on on our campuses, mainly about contraception, abortion, IVF.
Got it. Thank you. And then we do have someone noting it. It does appear they may have been doing that as a tactic to give to lawmakers. So perhaps not on campus, but wouldn't surprise me if it did. Um, The next question that I have, and this is going to be for Rachel. What advice do you have to non-healthcare workers, whether they be folks on campus, off campus, and how we can best advocate for patients' rights without being in the office?
Yeah, honestly, I would kind of flip that. And I think, like most reproductive health and abortion and reproductive justice advocacy are by non-providers and are happen kind of outside of clinics. And so I kind of feel like I take, a more minor role as as a direct provider than a lot of advocates do. I think one, being really educated on issues. I think information definitely is power. I think even non-clinicians just generally being educated, like for example, for abortion pills and self-managed abortion, what are the main medications used? How do they work? What are the common side effects? And when would be a reason to maybe seek formal health care? And likewise for procedural abortion, kind of just having a general feel for what the procedure entails, general steps, what people can expect, when each procedure can be, when medication abortion versus procedural abortion can be offered. I think just kind of having a general gist of being able to provide people their options if you have someone in your life that approaches you. And then I think, just ongoing storytelling, if people have had abortions, our most strong kind of storytelling experiences are from people who have had an abortion. And I think that storytelling is really, really powerful in our movement. And then finally, I think a lot of this comes down to just normalizing abortion. Like, abortion is healthcare, abortion is normal, abortion is not a dirty word, and just kind of living out your day-to-day life in that way. And being ready with being the person that someone would feel comfortable approaching if they were pregnant and didn't want to be, had a friend that was pregnant and didn't want to be, were considering options. Just being that go-to person for people can be really powerful.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I will especially emphasize the role of storytelling, is incredibly important for what we've seen from the data that is most impactful when trying to reach folks who may be on the fence. And then if on your last point too, yes, being somebody that folks can trust. I will frequently try to correct folks in my family who will say, I'm personally pro-life, but when they're really describing pro-choice, but that like type of language could signal to others. And again, like abortion is incredibly common. 1 out of 4 women will have an abortion in America. And so when you say things like that, you are sort of signaling to others if you are someone that they can come to for information or not. And so to be that trusted person, thank you so much for sharing that. And I do know the majority of the reproductive health movement aren't specifically doctors themselves. Um, uh, that isn't the case, but the role that you play, Rachel, and that other medical providers play is, of course, the one of the most crucial. My next question is for Hannah. You touched on this a little bit. When crafting College Park Plan B, did you get any additional pushback, whether it be from folks who used anti-abortion rhetoric or folks who were just generally cautious about the concept of Plan B on campus?
Great question. Honestly, we have not really received any pushback. However, I'm glad that you brought that up because in like the planning process of this whole project, that was something that we were trying to be really considerate of and just like making sure we have all of our bases covered and that there's no area that we are going to be like particularly vulnerable for antis. But again, with like if there are people who maybe are a little bit wary of there just being like emergency contraception available at all times for free for anyone who requests it, again, we kind of try to counter that by promoting a lot of information and education on what is emergency contraception and um why is it important that people have access to it and what does it mean for like broader reproductive autonomy and especially why we as college students are like uniquely positioned to do this peer-to-peer distribution. So yeah, I feel very lucky because my school, apart from being pretty huge and having a very large student population, a lot of our student population does rally behind us and loves to spread awareness themselves about the things that we do and what we provide. So we've gotten largely positive feedback.
That's awesome. I wish all folks on campus who are trying to do something similar, this similar ease, although I know that likely won't be the case, but that's really great news. Um, Circling back, Rachel, I wanted to ask you, could you dive into a little bit about some of the challenges uh, medical students or folks interested in becoming doctors or nurses struggle with some universities refusing to provide abortion care, or like some of the barriers there to learning for folks who are hoping to become OBGYNs or abortion providers?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing is that I don't know, I'm sure the statistic is comparable for other health professions programs, but 60% of medical schools have no formal abortion curriculum. So that means like there might not even be a single slide in the thousands and thousands of slides that medical students are seeing on abortion care. And so I think that's kind of a first part is just even getting the basic conceptual knowledge of medication abortion and procedural abortion is something that most students will not get, most medical students will not get as a part of their core medical school curriculum. I think the next step then is then that puts it on medical students to seek out that education themselves, which is a lot to ask when there's so many demands being placed on students and you're having to learn so much to then go seek that out. I think that's where medical students for choice is absolutely invaluable. So if there is a chapter on someone's campus, I definitely recommend getting involved. And if not, there's also a lot of national programs, the annual conference, webinars. They're just truly an amazing organization, and probably 80% of the education that I got in medical school regarding abortion care was from medical students for choice programming. I also would put a plug in for the American Medical Student Association's Reproductive Health Project. They do a lot of awesome education and programming as well, specifically for medical students that are interested in reproductive health. And it's all centered around the reproductive justice framework. I think actual like hands-on training, it can be tricky. Some schools won't allow students to do rotations providing abortion care because they see it as quote a liability, even though they wouldn't say that about us doing literally, trauma surgery during medical school. Um, but I think that hands-on training can be a little tricky, and even something as a resident that I'm running into is how do we get access to those educational opportunities? And I think networking is huge, and abortion providers are very passionate about what they do, and they want to train the next generation of abortion providers. So I think just getting in these spaces, like Medical Students for Choice, American Medical Student Association, and finding some networking. But it's unfortunate. A lot of times it involves going out of state. And a lot of kind of logistical struggles, but there are a lot of abortion providers that want to teach future abortion providers.
Awesome. Thank you for walking us through that. That is some great organizations that you shouted out. And hopefully the barrier to learning how to provide an abortion slowly diminishes, because we know how popular abortion is with the most recent election as well. So uh, before we close out, I want to plug, we have two new videos out within the past week covering Students for Life of America, in which we asked Kristen Hawkins and one of their spokespeople about her sort of hidden stance of criminalization of people who have abortions, of which Hawkins stated that she is open to the possibility of laws and culture change. So do check those out. And her spokesperson apparently claimed that Hawkins believes the opposite. So watch those. Those are on our social media platforms and our website. Um, And to round us out, thank you so much to Lucia for being on this panel, and thank you to Hannah and Rachel for being here and sharing your expertise. The work that you're doing is incredibly important, so thank you for sharing it, and thank you to Kieran for organizing this. And with that, I hope everybody has a great rest of their day and takes care for the rest of the year. Bye, everybody.